Right. Ladies and gentlemen, panelists, chairman, welcome to the second day of this week's webinar titled PPE Crisis or Opportunity. I chose that title because, yes, for sure, the whole world was in crisis. And there have been opportunities for many companies, but also there are some companies who have lost out and is still struggling right now. Today, I want to bring this fantastic panel to just explain a little bit of what happened during that crisis. And I've chosen Samantha to sort of go over the opportunity that she was able to gain from that as well. I'm fully aware that there's a lot of people who are still struggling. But the only way we're going to make any changes is by continually talking and working together and putting this in front of the government and letting them understand that our industry is here to help and guide. We're not here to dictate, we're here to help and guide. And we've got some of the most innovative companies. We've got BSFI here today. We've got Adam Mansell. But I'm going to introduce everybody right now so that you know who is on the panel today and joining us. So let me start off by, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Yvette Ashby. I'm the CEO for the Professional Clothing Industry Association Worldwide. We also have our chairman, John Mill, who will give you an overview of the association. Richard Jessup is a sales director for Gerber Technology, who has been our supporter all through this crisis and supporter to the industry all through this crisis, and trying to help manufacturers to manufacture gowns and look at new ways of working together. I'm delighted that Adam Mansell, the CEO of UKFT, who's been working closely with myself during the pandemic, who will give you updates on the crisis that's still with us at the moment and what they're doing. I know a lot of you has emailed me and want to know why the manufacturing that we discussed earlier in the year is some of it been withdrawn, but I'm sure you'll be able to cover that with you. We also have Alan Murray, CEO of the BSFI, and Roy Wilder, who will be also explaining some of the challenges they faced during this pandemic, and believe me, there were plenty. Paul Bryce, Vice President of Ansell, and he will also explain the challenges that they face because they work closely not only in this country but worldwide and with the government. Samantha Fernando, Sales Director of Keela International, and she will be explaining about the opportunities. So let me start off by just going straight into introducing our chairman, John Mill. John.
Thank you, Yvette, and good afternoon to you all, ladies and gentlemen. And on behalf of the BCS, I would like to welcome you all to our very first webinar week, which we hope will be the first of many to come. This week, we're trying to engage with industry after a difficult year in order to get the focus back on track and to pick up from where we left off in dealing with the challenge that the industry faces. Our topic today is PPE, crisis or opportunity. It is a timely subject matter as the National Audit Office, the UK's independent public spending watchdog, have today published a report to which Yvette and I have given evidence previously on the supply of personal protective equipment during the COVID-19 pandemic. This report sits alongside a previous report issued by the NAO on the broader theme of the overall cost of the pandemic to the taxpayer. The PCIW, alongside the UKFT, and we are very pleased to have Adam Mansell with us today, have been in regular contact with the Cabinet Office, particularly so in the spring months, to support the industry's skills and expertise in the provision of PPE in its broadest sense. We continue to advise the Government on issues and outcomes, and the PCIW will very shortly be providing the Government, Cabinet Office and MPs with its own report, in addition to that of the UKFT already issued, with our review of highlighting the UK's capacity and our conclusions and recommendations for future action. This report will also be made available to our membership and partners in due course. I would also like to welcome our panellists and presenters today and thank them for their knowledge, expertise, and indeed for giving us their time today to both present and answer some of your questions on the very relevant topic of PPE. We'll ensure that all questions will be answered, particularly those not covered today because of time constraints. Having had a very informative webinar yesterday afternoon on sustainability, we're following this up with further webinars on the UK CE marking of PPE and manufacturing and sourcing. We very much hope you find the topics we have established to be of value to you, and we look forward to your joining us on other afternoons this week as your time and interest allows. We're also indebted to Gerber for their terrific support for us today. Our sincere thanks to you, Richard, and the company. The professional clothing industry worldwide is the only sector-specific trade body devoted to the multifaceted professional clothing industry and help our members to discover new opportunities for their businesses by putting buyers in touch with suppliers for workwear, corporate, and PPE. As a not-for-profit organisation, we place our members at the forefront of our work. We are run by members for the benefit of the members. We are thus a knowledge bank, a meeting place, a network, and a voice to government. We bring together organisations, experts, and individuals from across the industry to create a platform through which we provide business opportunities, professional guidance, and strategic support for those who are part of our thriving trade, and help our members grow their businesses and extend their reach. We also publish online the PCIW Voice magazine dedicated to the industry. We also celebrate the industry by organising the annual PCIW Awards event, and alongside this run a summit of relevant topics for learning, debate and discussion. Sadly, we were not able to hold it this year due to the pandemic, but are intending to hold it next June in 2021, when we very much hope it can be run in accordance with government guidelines in force at the time. Please look for updates on our website at www.pciw.org. And finally, again, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. If you have any feedback, we'd be delighted to hear from you either directly to Yvette and our team or through info@pciw.org. Thank you for listening. Back to you, Yvette.
Thank you very much. And this afternoon, our first panelist is Richard Jessup, Sales Director of Gerber. Welcome, Richard, and thank you. Off you go.
Thank you, Yvette, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen, so I think, just bear with me one moment. I've just got a few short slides that I'd like to just run through, and maybe that will set the scene for the session. So hopefully you can see the title screen, the title slide now. So yeah, I'd just like to, if I can, just take us back maybe a few months to the start of the pandemic. You know, we got to know, as a company, we got to know about things quite early because we have operations in China. But you know, as the pandemic began to hit the UK in the spring, you know, we thought it our duty as a business to put something in place to try and help clothing manufacturers, not just in the UK but around the world as a global organisation. So, bear with me a second. There we go. That's better. So we knew that according to the World Health Organization, there was a real shortage, of PPE, both masks, gowns, and other equipment. The challenge of manufacturers was how do they respond to that? And actually, the great news is that many companies stepped up, raised their hands, and said, look, we don't make PPE today, but it's something that we'd love to do for the future. We'll react, we'll respond, and we'll step up and help out in this situation. And many of them came to us and said, with a lot of questions, and said, look, how do we convert? How do we change? How do we make this stuff? Where does the equipment, where does the equipment come from? Where do the materials come from? How do we connect into the supply chain? And these were many questions that we tried to answer and tried to help people to answer as part of our response to the situation. So we set up a PPE task force, and the purpose of that really was to share information. So we were, if you like, a sponge. We took as much information as we could, be it patterns, be it experience, expertise, on how to scale and how to produce the masks, gowns, or the garments, and all the products that were required by the health services. And also, in addition to that, we helped many customers to retool their manufacturing to make PPE, and that's been a global response, and it's worked very well in many different cases. So you'll see from the slide here, we set up a dedicated website where people could go find these resources. We liaised with many different government and financial associations in order to get the information and find out where the funding could come from to help people convert. We worked as a matchmaking service to connect the demand with the supply as much as we possibly could. And one of the biggest challenges was, where was the fabrics, the materials going to come from? And we hopefully managed to connect some of the dots there too. As a global organization, you'll see that many of these the companies we helped are also international. So these are some that you'll see from the US, but actually, it was we helped as many companies in the UK as we did around the world. And I think the important thing was that many of the companies were lost. Many of these manufacturers didn't know where to go to. So the important thing in connecting the dots was they had access to the right information to start making PPE and to help the global fight against the crisis. So, I don't want to steal too much of other people's thunder here. What happened next? How did the UK garment manufacturers react to this situation? Well, I'm pleased to say that many rolled their sleeves up, got started, and started making PPE. Was it perfect? Well, no, because some had a big challenge finding the fabrics. Some found that they'd manufactured PPE and it wasn't to the right specifications. Some actually won government contracts, and then those contracts disappeared before they even managed to source materials. So it's been a real challenging situation, but I think there are many good stories as there are bad stories. The big question now, and I think this is something that the panel will address as we go through the session today, is what happens next. Are we going to be able to continue manufacturing PPE in the UK? Will the government make it possible for manufacturers to continue doing so? Will the contracts be awarded? We'd love for that to be the case. We'd like to continue to support companies in the UK manufacturing PPE. But let's see. And I'll close my section now and hand over to the rest of the panel to start the discussion.
Thank you, Richard. That was brilliant. Thank you. Just to remind anyone, our panelists listening, please feel free to put the questions in the chat to our panelists here, and we will take the questions at the end of the presentation, which will bring us up to about 3 o'clock. So we'd like to welcome our next panelist, which is Adam Mansell, the CEO of the UKFT. Welcome, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette, and thank you for asking me to join the panel this afternoon. And I think, firstly, I'd just like to sort of start off by echoing something that Richard said. I mean, I think my experience of this entire period from a UK manufacturing point of view is that what failed was the government, not the industry. I think the industry in the UK stepped up to the plate remarkably quickly. I was personally bowled over by the number of volunteers that contacted me and Richard and Yvette as well. I know, we had more offers of help than we knew what to do with. However, unfortunately, the decisions on using UK manufacturing didn't fall down to Yvette and I. Otherwise, I think the world would be a slightly different place now. My experience, if I'm being blunt, about how the government handled this particular issue is pretty appallingly. I don't think there's any other way of putting it other than that. The government had a significant lack of knowledge of what the UK industry looked like. Mm-hmm. The government assumed that everyone that was left manufacturing was of the scale of Burberry or of Barber. And of course, that's not the case for the vast majority of our clothing manufacturing. The vast majority of our clothing manufacturing employ less than 30 people. They produce fantastic goods, but they're not high volume manufacturing units. And rather than reaching out to industry experts, the government did what all governments do, and is they reached out to management consultants, and they brought Deloitte on board to try and manage the situation for them. They realized that they had a crisis, and they realized they needed to do something about it. They had plenty of opportunity to engage with, for instance, major retailers. We've got some of the biggest retailers in the world here who are very, very adept at putting together very quick sourcing strategies from around the globe. But the government decided that wasn't what they wanted. They wanted to bring on board management consultants. But yet again, the management consultants knew nothing about the industry. They again assumed that all the manufacturing that was left in the UK was of volume, and it wasn't. So I think Yvette and I spent an awful lot of our time in the early days trying to educate the government and Deloitte about what the industry really looked like, what we could actually do, how quickly we could do it, what we would need to do in order to turn PPE around. What is PPE? I think so many of us, me included at the beginning of this, sort of had a vague notion of what PPE was. Was a mask PPE, wasn't it? Well, yeah, all those sorts of questions. So it was a very difficult situation, but the government had a fantastic opportunity to look at ways in which it could build resilience into the supply chain. Do I blame the government for its very quick reactions to buy product overseas? No, I don't. They were faced with an absolute crisis and they needed to respond as quickly as they possibly could. And because we don't have a large volume manufacturing industry here in the UK, the only way that government could meet those immediate needs very quickly was by overseas sourcing. Did they use the right people? No, they didn't. I think we've only had to open the newspapers pretty much every week for the past couple of months to find out that the sourcing contracts were placed with people who didn't know what they were doing. I think that's the politest way of putting it. But they needed to do that immediate piece. But what they have failed to do consistently ever since then is to look at the benefits of working with UK manufacturing. And that could be any number of things. In exactly the same way that big retail are now looking at how you work with UK manufacturing, because you can operate at speed. You don't necessarily, you could put your bulk orders in China, but you could do your top-ups in Scotland. That's very, very valid for PPE as it is for high street fashion. Equally, the government is particularly keen on the levelling up agenda. A lot of our manufacturing is based in the Midlands, Yorkshire, and the North, and Scotland. There's a fantastic opportunity for the government to meet its own rhetoric, but again, it's failed to do that, partly because they just found it too difficult. They found it too difficult to think about how they could work with consortia. They found it too difficult to understand that melt blown fabric was, a particular commodity that was quite difficult to get hold of. It took them a long time to realise that there was a very large manufacturer in Scotland. But even when they'd done that, they didn't realise that there was a manufacturer in Cumbria and there was a manufacturer in Yorkshire. And even now, those two manufacturers aren't, although they are supplying melt blown fabric to governments around the world, they're not supplying it to the UK government. So there are a catalogue of failures. And I have to say, I find most of the findings of the NAO report that came out overly positive towards the government in the way it handled the situation. I think they've missed a significant opportunity. But that's probably enough from me about criticising the government. I think what we need to focus on here is about the opportunities that there still exist. And I think the key opportunities from where I'm sitting is because no matter what we think, the government and lots of us in all of our businesses, we end up purchasing on price. That's what really drives us. We might make, we might talk a good talk, but when it comes down to it, we look at pounds, shillings and pence, and the government's no different on that. But if as an industry, as a UK manufacturing industry, we can focus on reusables, then all of a sudden that price point issue starts to dissipate. Can we match the price of throwaway single-use items from China? Probably not. And we certainly don't have the volume manufacturing. But if we start to look at reusables, where we've got manufacturers now who, for several months now, have been working on gowns that meet all the appropriate regulations that can be reused more than 50 times. And once you've got that level of reusability, then the price issue vanishes. Yes, the initial purchase price is significantly more than a disposable item, but the amount of time and the amount of use you get out of it is obviously significant. And I think, we can demonstrate quite clearly to government that this can be done in the UK. We've got individual companies, as Richard said at the beginning, who, if a lot of the wins in this situation were done by networking locally, by local manufacturers knocking on the door of the NHS, or even the other way around. One of the best examples of good things that came out of this was the NHS trusts up in Newcastle and Northumberland, who collectively said, right, you know what, we've got a huge budget here, we're going to spend it locally. And they did, and they're continuing to do so. They've put together a consortium of over 26 UK manufacturers now that collectively are providing over 300,000 gowns a week. That is volume. They do it at speed. They do it, they provide local employment. Local employment means that there's less ill health, which has knock-on positive effects to the NHS. So there's all sorts of good things out there. So I think we need to focus on reusables, but I think the industry itself also needs to get a lot better at talking to each other. The number of people who didn't know what we still make here in the UK, even amongst the UK manufacturing industry, is concerning. We need to be better at talking to each other. We need to be better at working together. And we also need to be better at investing in new technologies and better, cleaner, simpler ways of making things. I know Sam, who's going to be talking later, has, a lot of what they've been doing is around welded seams. We're not very good in the UK at some of those new advanced technologies that might mean we could make stuff quicker, cheaper, and at volume. So we need to invest as an industry in those new technologies, and we need to invest in skills and training as well. We need to make sure that, as one of the negative impacts of COVID, of which there have been many, is that unfortunately the manufacturing industry at the moment in the UK is looking at somewhere between 12 and 25% redundancies across the manufacturing sector here in the UK. We still employ 120,000 people, so it's a significant number of people who might lose their job as a result of COVID. And unfortunately, the state of the industry is that all the skills exist in the older workforce. We were getting very good at bringing young people in and training them up. We were beginning to see growth in the numbers of apprenticeships offered. Unfortunately, understandably, but unfortunately, industry has had to let go a lot of those younger people because they've needed to try and produce the same amount of product, but with less people. And they've obviously needed to keep the older workforce with the higher skills levels. But we need to readdress that as we start to come out of the pandemic. We need to make sure that we're investing in skills. We need to make sure that we're getting young people interested in careers in making things here in the UK, that they understand that it's not just all about being a designer. It's not just about being the buyer for ASOS. There are many, many really meaningful jobs in the industry. So there's a lot that we can do here in the UK. And I think part of what PCIAW and UKFT have been doing and will continue to do is to just not stop raising the issue with government. You know, I speak to ministers literally every week, several times a week, and I have not dropped the issue of the opportunities that exist for UK manufacturing, for employment, for skills and training, and for young people to get jobs, all down to one simple change in government policy. And this doesn't just apply to PPE, this applies across all sorts of areas. Think about the military, the NHS obviously, but think about the military. Think about how many uses of textiles there are in the military beyond PPE. You know, or even in construction. You know, if we're going to have HS2, think about the amount of fabric that's going to be going into those trains, or the amount of geotextiles that's going to be going into underneath the tracks. So there's a huge range of uses for UK-made textiles and garment manufacturing that the government could, by one simple change, by focusing a small percentage of its public purchasing budget, dedicating that to UK manufacturing would have a significant change overnight. So I think I'll leave it there, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about why the government did what they did, why the contracts were placed with certain people and not others. I can't answer those, is the honest answer. I think some of those decisions were questionable at best, and some of the contracts were given to the wrong people and the wrong product was supplied. But equally, when the government did give, sorry, I said I was going to finish, now I'm carrying on. Even when the government did give contracts to UK manufacturers, they gave them in such a way that it meant it was very difficult for some manufacturers to meet those requirements. In many instances, the government purchased the fabric and made sure that a garment manufacturer had to buy that fabric from the government. In many instances, the government bought the machinery and made the UK manufacturer use that machinery. And in some cases, the machinery the UK government bought was wrong. And in many instances, they were asking for a price point which meant that it was just impossible for UK manufacturers to meet. In the same way that we have numerous stories of big retailers wanting to buy jeans made in the UK at the same price point that they buy jeans made in Bangladesh, the government were wanting to buy PPE made in the UK at the same price point they were having it made in the Far East, and that just doesn't add up. So, you know, there was a lot of misinformation, there was a lot of lack of knowledge, but there's still significant opportunity there. So it's our role, it's Yvette's and my role, to make sure that we carry on banging the drum for UK companies and UK manufacturing in particular to help build resilience into our supply chains. But I think that's enough of me tub thumping for now. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Adam. Adam is absolutely right when he said about the price point. But what we're trying to demonstrate to the government in the report that we're writing is giving them the breakdown and the scenarios of transporting that goods from China or anywhere else further afield, the Asian continent, to the UK. So during the report, if anybody wants to contribute to it, please feel free to email me. But given the breakdown, you know, Adam says they bought the fabric, they bought the machinery, but at the end of the day, if it's not fit for purpose and if they don't understand, again, that's wasting part of that £18 billion which we spent on PP. We did not spend £18 billion in PP. It's impossible to spend that amount of money. What we spent it on, and I don't want to be negative, I've really tried hard not to do this, what they've spent it on is giving the money to companies who had no idea what they were doing, and that's where the wastage come in. And I think, yes, Adam is absolutely right. They could, the National Audit Office could have gone a lot further in explaining a bit more, so that everyone who's reading it, and there are lots of people reading it currently, and they're getting even more frustrated because of not putting across the real truth of what happened. So I felt that it was almost glossed over because they spoke to me, they spoke to my chairman John, they spoke to a lot of people, and a lot of it was glossed over. So, you know, I know there's a lot of you out there at the moment that's really, really frustrated. I'm on your page, but you know, what is done, and what we're trying to do now is look to the future. And I don't want to antagonize the government, because it's really, really important that they understand that we're here to support them and help them the best way we can, in order that they'll make changes and take our industry seriously to go forward. So with that, I think I'm moving on now to Alan Murray, the CEO. And Alan, the BSFI, they work tirelessly. I know this because people coming to me, companies coming to me with nightmare stories, and the only place I could say is go and speak to this man, Alan Murray. Don't mention my name because they're going to get rubbed off with me. Just go to this company, here's the number, off you go. Because there were so many counterfeit going on, etc. But you know what? Let me introduce Alan and he can explain it for himself. Alan, welcome.
Thank you very much, Yvette, John, Richard, and Adam. I think, Jeff, could you possibly put there we are. Maybe take it off edit. Thanks. Right, thanks so much. And it's a pleasure to be back with PCIAW. And for those that experienced my last presentation, which was on the PPE regulations sometime in 2019, I think, I can only hope that the PowerPoint slides behave a little better this time. But before I get into today's topic, I note with some real interest that the sustainability content from yesterday. And I'd like to highlight that we come from the established PPE industry, as opposed to the challenges that we're facing some of the participants today. But we come from that industry. And I'd just like to highlight that an awful lot of work on sustainability has gone in the PPE industry through us and the European Safety Federation. And there's an article in it this December in HSM. So please have a look and hope you find it of interest. But today, I'm Alan Murray. I'm responsible for managing the British Safety Industry Federation, and I'll be joined by my colleague, Roy Wilders. Roy manages the Registered Safety Supplier Scheme, which is our quality assurance program for the PPE market. Today's session is titled PPE Crisis or Opportunity. And we're, of course, discussing this in the context of the industry, quite rightly. But we have to remember that this has been a tragedy, costing the 50,000 plus lives across the country, and countless jobs and livelihoods have gone. So PPE crisis or opportunity? Well, I can tell you for a long time in the PPE industry, it was genuinely a crisis. We've talked numbers already, but by July this year, the UK government had managed to spend, in inverted commas, around £15 billion on PPE. And to put that into some sort of perspective, the UK national budget for our defence is 55 billion. And another example would be transport, which is 40 billion. So 15 billion is an incredible number, and not always wisely spent, as we know. And please remember that this is PPE that's limited to a very narrow application. Normally in the UK, the annual spend on PPE from head to toe would be about £1.5 billion. So if you could maybe change to my next slide, Jeff. So how did our crisis come about? We had the dislocation of the supply chains and a massive upsurge in demand, which saw, in our experience, it saw huge amounts of existing but unsafe and non-compliant PPE coming into the market. Now, like I think Richard said, that they were on the case pretty early. I think we were too at the beginning of the year, and we were highlighting the issues to the authorities from the end of January, beginning of February. But From March through to July, BSIF reported over 300 traders and products to the authorities. And the authorities in the UK, if PPE is being used at work, it's the Health and Safety Executive. If it's for private use, it would be Trading Standards. But in the main, our reporting went to the Health and Safety Executive and the Office of Product Safety and Standards, which is part of, or an agency within BASE. So we were greatly bolstering the market surveillance of PPE. In many ways, somebody mentioned earlier about deficiencies within the government, but in many ways, without BSIF, I cannot see that a lot of market surveillance was going on. And reporting only happened, by the way, after we engaged with the suppliers and tried to help them to see how to do it properly. So it's vital that we remain vigilant because product is in the market and make sure that only compliant, properly performing and certified PPE is in use. If you could maybe change to my next slide, please, Jeff. Now, many people will have experienced this, but in March, the EU published a recommendation, which was an easement on the compliance to the PPE regulations, and that was to help combat the immediate shortages of PPE. And this was, of course, at a time when more businesses were being encouraged to enter into the marketplace. Now, the easement was adopted by the UK at the end of March, but throughout the ongoing period, OPSS had to publish multiple versions of the guidance to manufacturers in relation to how products could be produced and could comply. Now, again, we heard tangential references to this earlier on, but by September, there were 11 different versions of the same guidance that had been produced. So it was very, very difficult, very, very difficult time. And that was also at a time when there was really great confusion about what was PPE in this context. Did it include things that we would recognize not as PPE, but as medical devices? And I think Paul Bryce will cover some more on that. Now, as Yvette mentioned earlier, we were greatly involved, and in May, we held a seminar for businesses and end users of PPE that was in relation to non-compliance of product and documentation, how to spot a fake. Now, we had some 1,300 people on that webinar, and we had 200 questions tabled, all, by the way, answered within 5 working days, which we were both proud and amazed about. But Roy, who'll join us in a few minutes, will cover more of those experiences. So maybe I could have our next slide, please, Jeff. So this is my final slide before I pass on to Roy, but I'd like to do that on the basis of reminding people that now more than ever, we need to be vigilant about what PPE is circulating in the market. And people need to be careful about how they select and where they purchase their product from. By the way, someone was talking about waste earlier. From this year's government purchases of PPE, there are still some 195 million pieces that cannot be used. So we talk to end users and we call for them to help us by supporting our registered safety supplier scheme, only purchasing product from people who know what they're talking about, and join us, as we have with PCIEW, as a supporter of the scheme. All registered safety suppliers commit to only providing fully compliant product, and they're audited by us on an annual basis for both product and their quality systems. So now, if I may, I'd like to pass on to Roy, who will illustrate some more detail on what we encountered in the marketplace. Roy, if I may.
Thank you, appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much to PCIEW for allowing us this opportunity. And to coin a phrase, could I have my next slide, please? So I'm going to focus a little bit on some of the counterfeit or not strictly compliant, or let's call them what they are, sometimes a chancer in the marketplace that has taken place over this past 8 or 9 months. One of the largest, and as it says there on the slide, the single most prolific CE certificate that we at the BSIF saw, but isn't a CE certificate, was issued by ECM, a company based out of Italy, purporting to be a notified body. They are a notified body for certain products, for medical devices. So in some cases that may be product that is currently being described as PPE, but they are certainly not a notified body in relation to the PPE regulation. If you actually look at the piece that I've highlighted there, it states that this document has been issued on a voluntary basis and upon request of the manufacturer. And what we were seeing was an awful lot of product coming into the UK from the Far East, from mainland Europe, and other points as well, with this document where they were convinced that the ECM certificate was a CE certificate, partly because it has a CE mark on it. If they'd actually been able to read it, or if it had been explained clearly to them by ECM, the next part that's highlighted there explains to them that the manufacturer is responsible for the CE marking process, and all that this certificate actually allowed them to use was the ECM mark. ECM were reported to the local authority that manages them in Italy, and they have been gently warned about their status as a notified body should this type of thing continue. Their response has been to say that many of these have been taken out of context and or counterfeited. I know for a fact that if I had a penny for every single one of these certificates I saw between March and July, it would certainly pay for my holiday next year. So this is probably the most common certificate that we see, and even in recent weeks, since we've seen the second lockdown come into force, this certificate started to rear its head again, both through new entrants into the PPE market and through some of the more experienced members. So if we could have the next slide, please. Unfortunately, ECM weren't alone in this, and this is just an example of some of the other certification that we've seen. So we have companies such as ICR Polska from Poland, claiming to be a notified body, but not. VIC, that you can just see in the middle there, claiming to have a business address in the UK and actually to be a notified body, and weren't. And that certificate actually states on it that it is a CE certificate. So it is out and out, complete and utter lie. As you can see, many of these documents have come in from all around the world. We've had some from China, some from Turkey, all over the place. There are a multitude of these type of certificates being issued, and the trouble is that a lot of the people who are now for the first time, as previous has been discussed, are facing the decision of what to buy, where to get it from. And as somebody said earlier, I think it may have been Adam actually, pounds, shillings and pence, this has come into it. And if you're offered something with what you believe is a certificate at the most competitive price, then it's understandable why people look towards this. Our role within BSIF, and particularly my role within the safety supplier scheme, is to make sure that our members are actually making sure that all the products that they bring in are correct and compliant with the current legislation. We also do a lot of mystery shopping and purchasing of products, not only from high street stores or distributors of PPE, but also from online stores, where we find that there is a lot of this type of product that is being offered without the correct information behind it. And this covers everything from face masks, full respiratory equipment, face shields as well, on into more traditional PPE, and particularly things like high visibility flame retardant garments. All of them can be found on there. So we spend a lot of time trying to identify these products and then report them onwards, and if at all possible, trying to point buyers in the right direction. We spent a lot of time this year speaking with people from various NHS departments, the Welsh government, the Scottish government, all coming to us, asking for guidance, asking for support in identifying which products were genuine and which products were liable to cause them problems. Could I have the next slide, please? One of the things that we did after our webinar earlier this year was to actually produce a general guidance document, just 2 or 3 pages of A4, that showed what people should be looking for if they were looking for a PPE certificate. So although BSIF are by no means a notified body, this was a mock-up that we designed to show the sort of information that should be on a certificate, enable you to actually tell the difference between some of these non-compliant fake certificates that are coming in and something that is issued by a genuine notified body approved by NANDO. Could I have the next slide as well, please? In addition to the Module B certificate, what's normally known as the CE certificate, one of the pieces of information that is required to be issued is the Declaration of Conformity. So again, we did a mock-up of this, and this information is available on the BSIF website to download, and for yourselves, your members, and even end users to actually use to help them be more educated. We know that the majority of manufacturers here in the UK or who are long-standing in the PPE industry understand this. They know what is required of them in terms of certification and in terms of declarations of conformity. So it's a good way to reinforce, have you got the right documents? Are you sure? How can you check this? So it's a tool that's there to be used. And the next slide, please. One of the other things that we wanted to highlight is where the markings are required to be on PPE. Now, whether that's on garments, whether that's on masks, anything that is actually being put out there as a CE marked product has to carry that CE mark, has to carry the information as to what standards it's approved to, and has to carry information on the manufacturer, and make sure that all of that is available for the end user. Now, some products, obviously some of the masks, it's not possible to include all of this information on the product, so it is permissible to put it on the packaging. But again, this sort of information is very, very valid for the end users to be able to differentiate between somebody who is producing and supplying a genuine bona fide product and somebody who is providing a counterfeit product. And next slide, please. Just to highlight, these are just 4 stories that I grabbed off the net over the past few months. There is a lot of link with this fake PPE into organised crime. It's being used to fund not only, you know, people wanting to make millions and billions out of it, but also to go further than that. It goes into people trafficking, it goes into the drug smuggling industry as well. There are people out there who are using the opportunity to take money from people who are desperate from PPE to fund other criminal activities. There's a lot of write-up on this, and again, if you look at the website for the ESF, the European Safety Federation, you can see more on that story there as well. And the final slide, please. So it was a challenging time for us as a federation. We were ably supported by our membership, many of whom were reporting on to us things that they thought weren't correct. We had some fantastic support from notified bodies and also test labs throughout the UK to help us make sure that the correct products, wherever possible, were getting out to people. And we've had some good support from both HSE and Trading Standards, where we've had to report non-compliant product onwards. Finally, just to say, there is information available to PCIAW members on our website, and if you wanted to know more about the Registered Safety Supplier Scheme, you can find that on our website there as well. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to Yvette. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roy. Thank you, Alan, for that. I know a lot of people reported to me at the time. I think the worst one I heard about was the lady who spent thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds, and they wouldn't release her product off the tarmac once it was loaded onto the lorry in Turkey. So that was a nightmare. So there is just it was a challenging time for everyone. But I thank you all, and I know the work you're doing there is amazing. Um, Now I'd like to introduce you and welcome Paul Bryce. Paul Bryce is the Vice President of Ansell, and I'm delighted that he could join us today. Paul, off you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. Let me just, I'm going to do the risky thing that Roy and Alan chose not to do and share my screen and see if I can operate my own slides. So let me know when you can see it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and yeah, big thank you to Yvette and John for allowing me to speak with you today. I am going to go completely off topic, Yvette, if that's okay, for about 15 seconds or so, just to acknowledge something that Adam touched on, and also Roy as well. If I start with Roy, it'll be fresh in everyone's mind around fake or non-compliant PPE. I mean, that indeed is a phenomenon that has happened not just with so-called new players in the market, but we have seen and experienced ourselves a number of unfortunate individuals, shall we say, misrepresenting or claiming to represent otherwise credible manufacturers. So for those listening today, it would be a certain harsh reminder that, you know, if it sounds too good to be true right now, and certainly with some categories of PPE where supply it's not meeting demand, then the chances are that it probably is too good to be true. And I think as a sign of encouragement, indeed, for UK-based manufacturers of PPE, there was a moment in time, and indeed it's still evident in some raw materials, particularly the non-wovens, the melt-blown that Adam talked about, where indeed European and UK sources of those materials were on par with Far Eastern sources. Therefore, encouragement around UK manufacturing, what Adam talked about as well, and what Richard touched on in terms of automation and sophistication within your manufacturing capabilities to really optimize your productivity, combined with European and UK sources. There's no reason why this country cannot be competitive in the market. So completely off script. It was longer than 15 seconds, but I just wanted to drop that in there. So the question that I've been asked to address today really is how to navigate variations in regulations for PPE around the world. Now, as Alan and Roy would attest, I'm not going to do that justice in the 8 minutes, never let alone the 10 minutes that I was originally allotted. So I'll try and do my best and really focus on three key points. I mean, number one, again, a watch out, so to speak, on many of the areas of confusion that we've witnessed since the onset of this pandemic. That is being, whether the product is indeed PPE or a medical device, and I'll come back to that. Indeed, Alan touched on it. Second, I'll give you a very brief insight in what it means to be a global manufacturer of PPE, certainly as far as the world of regulatory compliance is concerned. And third, and I think this is something that, again, I give full credit to Alan and Roy and the team at the BSIF for, and full disclosure to everyone watching that don't know me, I'm not only part of the executive team here at Ansell, I'm actually on the board of the BSIF as well. So just in full transparency there. But organizations like the BSIF are there to help this industry and those that are taking a genuine and serious interest in supporting the manufacture and distribution or even importation of PPE to navigate the complex landscape that we exist in. So jumping quickly on, if I can get hopefully these slides to move. Yes, I can. So the first topic, look, as many people have quickly established during this pandemic, government included, and unfortunately, and quite seriously, often to the detriment of those frontline healthcare workers that need proper protection, navigating the regulatory landscape that we exist in is not quite as straightforward as some may have assumed. Now, even with the best intentions at heart, and again, Alan alluded to this, regulators have eased somewhat the conformity assessment process, not only in the UK and in the EU, but in other major economies in the world, the US and the FDA, for example, running a waiver program for their medical devices, if you like. But the basic premise here, and indeed the absolute minimum that people should reply on, is regardless of those easements or those recommendations, if you like, product itself ultimately still has to provide that minimum level of protection that you would expect. And of course, adherence to recognized standards is therefore an obligation, not just for existing players in the market, but of course any new entrants into the market. And the first point here really is where a lot of companies became confused. Not only companies looking to enter this market, but organizations already existing in the market, indeed looking to purchase PPE. And it was that distinct and not necessarily obvious difference between what is PPE and what is a medical device. And indeed, as you can see here, and you've probably already read by now, the definitions here that PPE is equipment that is designed and manufactured to be worn or held by a person for protection against one or more risks. The essence of the PPE regulation is that product is there to protect the wearer. On the flip side of that, medical devices, products that are intended to conform with the medical directives, soon indeed to also become a regulation, they're intended to be there to be worn in such a way that they protect the patient, certainly as far as gowns and surgical masks are concerned. Indeed, some of my friends, colleagues, if you like, in the respiratory industry used to explain this to me many years ago, that if you're wearing a respirator and you breathe out towards a patient, it's effectively a medical device. If you inhale as a surgeon or a doctor or otherwise medical professional, then it is PPE because it is protecting you. So indeed, this was somewhat of a talking point. I remember BSIF many, many years ago supporting, the industry itself and understanding the coexistence of PPE and medical device regulations. And of course, if that's a challenge for the industry itself, and indeed prior to COVID-19, there was very few products or manufacturers in the world that were able to bridge both of these worlds, you can imagine how difficult it has been for new entrants to this market. Second point, I've been in this industry for longer than I care to mention, to be fair, and Roy's laughing now because he knows probably the exact number, and certainly Alan does as well. And it's been a dream. It's been a dream of the industry. I've been involved in various working groups, either through the British Standards Institute or even in the SEN technical committees for many years myself. We've always talked and aspired in the industry to have an international standards world, if you like, a world where product performance is defined by a common set of performance standards and the use of PPE governed by consistent regulations or legislation. The reality is somewhat different. Believe it or not, the positive here is in terms of the European Union that we have is that we do have very well and clearly defined regulations governing PPE, both in the design and manufacture of the product, as well as how PPE should be used in the workplace. And that Directive 89656 EEC covers it, for example, basic things through to the PPE should be provided free of charge, whereas indeed identified via risk assessment that it is required in the workplace as, again, that last line of defence. So we have it pretty nice in the European Union right now. It is going to get a little bit more complicated in the coming months with that unfortunate B word that I can't seem to get away from in webinars right now with the introduction of the UK conformity assessment mark, but I know that's something for later on, so thankfully I don't need to cover that today. But suffice to say, when you go outside the European Union and indeed the UK, the world does become very, very complex. And indeed, some of the things that Roy has touched on and that we've seen, particularly in the respirators world, is companies or organizations, sometimes with good intent, sometimes with ill intent, looking to use products that are certified to other standards around the world, such as N95, KN95 respirators, and trying to effectively pass them off as suitable product for use in the European or UK market. And indeed, that is not necessarily the case. So this is a very complex world. It's one that companies like yourself invest a lot of time and resource in understanding and following. And it's certainly, I think, again, going back to my original point, been a surprise for a lot of companies that thought this was an easy world to navigate, and indeed an opportunity to make a quick buck. And again, what Adam said, the government themselves have found out to their detriment that it is not as easy as it may first appear. So on that point, in my final slide, how do we help better navigate this complex world? Well, there are organisations out there, the BSIF indeed representing UK companies, PPE manufacturers, safety, those actors, if you like, involved in the safety industry. But wherever you're listening from around Europe or indeed around the world, the chances are there is a similar association of manufacturers, distributors, importers of personal protective equipment involved in this safety industry, who have made it their vocation, if you like, their career, their want in life to ensure that the regulations are robust, they're consistent, and they're clear for those that do wish to take this industry seriously. It is, again, as I've touched on, something that many companies with good intent have tried to do the best, and it's unfortunate when I hear stories of companies that have tried to approach this in the right way and have been tripped up along the path, because there's a lot of information, a lot of people out there like Alan and Roy and the rest of the team at the BSIF, Henk van Hout and the team at the European Safety Federation really orchestrating things on a European level. And I've been part of also conversations with the International Safety Equipment Association, which is a rather curious title given that it refers to our equivalent of the ESF covering North America, mainly the United States, of course, where they've also been faced with similar challenges around fake, non-compliant PPE, as well as genuine, legitimate manufacturers from other industries that were looking for help, support, guidance, and how to support those frontline workers and other essential industries to be protected during this pandemic. So that's me, Yvette. Thank you again for the time, and I believe now I'm passing on to Sam.
Thank you very much, Paul. I hope you all find that interesting. Yes, we're going to be passing on to Sam Fernando, Sales Director of Keela International. Welcome, Sam.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, my love.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
So I work at Keela. We're a specialist technical outdoor manufacturer. Usually we produce outdoor clothing, PPE kits for not just the outdoor enthusiasts, but professionals, including military, emergency services, rescue. The other side of the business is an engineering company, and we manufacture the machines, testing equipment and consumables, also for the textile and clothing industry. So when this all started, and I'm going to echo a little bit of what Adam said and the other speakers, CV19 it has been an absolute game changer, and I guess the lessons to be learned that we all know, but this needs to go to government procurement, is to contingency and resilience, that in 10 years' time, if this had happened in 2030, I don't think what we've done now we would have been able to do. And it's shown how reliant we are on China. It's shown that in 10 years' time, those skill sets that we've got now, it's an aging workforce, they would have been lost. I don't think manufacturers would have been able to rise to the challenge in the same way. My feeling is that there is some positivity. I do feel we have the government's ear at the moment, but I feel that unless we kind of keep pushing on this, that the government, the procurement side, will forget this CV19, kind of warning that we've had, and 5 years from now, the industry will keep on declining. So I feel that there needs to be a real shift in policy and thinking, not just with government procurement, but also within our own industry, but also within the public. And I guess one of the reasons that I'm here is to try and kind of push and encourage us all to help in pushing this message forward. As Adam said about public procurement, it's not just about gowns. It's, from the NHS, which is the biggest procurement out there, there's scrubs, there's hats, there's all sorts of things. And it's also not just about the NHS, the military, for example, is buying huge amounts of stuff from China. And if in some of those tenders, just a few tenders, we could write in that a certain percentage must be made in UK, you could still have the cost as being low, but you would keep our industry alive, and we would keep, you know, all those skill sets in the UK. So that's my party political broadcast, but I'll come back to this. What are we doing as a company? So at present, we've made hundreds of thousands of gowns for the NHS. This is up in our factory in Glenrothes in Scotland. It's not a usual product for us to make. We do make PPE, but usually it's really technical and quite complex. But if you can do manufacturing, you can make every, you know, you can make anything if you've got the right mindset. And how we came about doing this manufacturing contract for the NHS, quite a few people have asked, and I can't really give you an exact answer. We just kept plugging away at stuff. I think when CV-19, when the crisis first started, we were like everybody, you know, we wanted to help out, and we're desperate to do our part. And we were in a sea of millions, from individuals to larger companies. You know, we were just a small SME, and in real danger, despite having all this technical manufacturing skills, that we were just lost in the noise. So we started helping out locally, our local NHS trust. We kind of built up from there. It wasn't plain sailing. We worked with a lot of others. We worked with SE, SMAS, CBI. We were very open in what we did. We gave open source information to other manufacturers. We were doing a bit of a scatter gun approach, very intense and firing on all the cylinders. Not everything worked, but you just have to kind of keep picking yourself up, keep on going with it. And the big part of all this was change. It was a huge change to go from what we'd done pre-CV-19 to suddenly doing all these other things to you know, help out with the CV-19 crisis. And that rate of change, that speed of innovation, that ability to be flexible was key in all this. And I think part of, you know, ticking that box really of making these things happen was within the team, that everybody wanted to help out, everybody wanted to make it work. So we started doing the NHS contract for gowns. Social distancing for us was a massive issue. You know, to keep a 2 metre space beside everybody was just impossible. And Scotland was much more focused on that 2 metre than perhaps England was. We had a local business that was on furlough, and they said use our facilities, so we used their space, which was fantastic. We then also looked at it as a long-term thing as well, and we're like, we need to take a leap of faith here. So we took a calculated risk, and we bought a factory during lockdown, because we could see that we, you know, to keep that space there and to keep this going for a long term, we needed to be proactive about it all. And this was a factory that hadn't been used for a few years. We fully fitted it out, and it was a huge undertaking. So what should have taken most companies months to plan and do, we did it in 10 days. If it didn't work, we still had the other facility, but we painted it, we refurbished it, we got electrics in, and all these things were made possible because of the team, that everybody was just so committed to making this work. And I think across the country, you know, this was happening in lots of businesses, you know, throughout. And I think this is one of the sad things about this crisis, is that the media was quite often, especially now, focusing on very negative stories, and all these positive and amazing stories, they're not getting heard, it's getting drowned out. So, I mean, some of the kind of stories that happened during that time, and there were amazing, wonderful stories. We had ex-employees turning up and rocking up at our door and saying, I want to help out, you don't need to pay me, just we did pay them, but, you know, we just want to help. We had local businesses and community just coming together and just offering their services. You know, we needed additional staff. Making gowns is a little bit different from making jackets, for example. So for every one sewing machinist, we needed usually 1 or 2 extra staff to do the QCing, the packing, the, you know, cutting and everything. It was a very fast operation. And so we had to recruit, and we also then had to go through a skills training process as well, because most people that came to us did not have skills. They weren't coming from this industry. So we had a real bunch of wonderful characters, from bus drivers that were furloughed, people that had been long-term unemployed, we had students, and we also had slightly more maybe aging workforce, hopefully they won't see this, you know, that had done sewing in the past, that had worked for companies making baby grows and things like that. And they all came together and they made it happen, they made it work. And all that kind of negativity and walls that sometimes, you have staff that come with those sorts of attitudes, that went out the window. It was a very positive, wonderful experience to be in. And
one of the reasons I'm cutting you
yeah,
the
sure.
I asked you to come on here. I wanted to hear the positive story. I want the audience to hear that there are good things that happen during this pandemic, because a lot of people work extremely hard throughout this. And if it wasn't for all those people that helped to make these gowns, the industry, the UK would not have survived this.
No.
So it's incredibly important. You're absolutely right that I think people have not been recognized for all the hard work that they've done, and that's the reason why I invited you here today, because I've been following you all along, as you well know, to sort of say that. And with the awards coming up next year, we have today, we're just putting together the program for the awards, and it's to recognize everyone in the industry who took part in um, making all the gowns, all the suppliers. I'll be writing to all the suppliers that I know of that took part in here, and just recognizing the heroes, all those companies. There's somebody you think that went beyond the call of duty. Please, 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 put them forward, because I think it would be an absolutely shame if we did not recognize all these people. And I'm glad you've opened that door for me, because I didn't want to sit here and just start to sell this. But, recognizing all of you who take part in here is important. The BSFI, they did an amazing job. Gerber has supported me right from the beginning with us doing the webinars, and we're getting hundreds of people on the webinars. And, not only just from the UK, but all over the world. But and this is so important. And I thought you said a really great thing. um, 2030, if this had happened in 2030, we would not have survived it, because
No.
we don't have the skill set. And this is where Adam, we're pushing and and with the awards, we try to encourage young designers to come and work in our industry, and we've seen some amazing skills, and we just got to keep on pushing that forward. So, it's about education. I myself went into the various different universities and tried to encourage them to explain. And I was really shocked at some of the universities. They've never visited a factory anywhere, and I thought, oh my goodness, how can you be teaching these students, and they've never visited a factory? So, and YKK was amazing. They organized that all the students visit factories, etc. And I thought, yeah, this is the way forward. This was way before this pandemic or was even thought of. I was just encouraging them to look to the future and really educate young designers, for them to think it's not just Vivian Westwood. There is another world that is waiting for their skills. So yes, absolutely. Please continue, Sam.
Sorry. I've kind of lost my thread now. I was called to give this talk quite last minute, so I have not really prepared a full talk. But yeah, I just exactly what Yvette says. The people that made all this possible, and I think throughout so many different businesses and companies throughout the UK, there will be lots and lots of stories like that. And certainly when I speak to other businesses, and you can all sense this sense of pride from them, where they look back and think this is what they've done in the last 6 months, and they're impressed with themselves, and they should be. They deserve a pat on the back, because it is amazing. We have really, jumped to the challenge, and we fulfilled it. So kudos to us. I think, moving on from that, 9 months later, I think everybody's all a bit fatigued, and, we're all on Christmas and we're all on a vaccine, fingers crossed. And, you know, there's lots of things that we need to do, you know, to try and, you know, keep things rolling, keep that positivity going, and keep that level of change. And for me, I do think manufacturing is crucial to the UK's well-being, especially with Brexit coming forward. I'm not a Brexiteer, I'm a Remainer, but it's happening. We've got to make it work. And there is some opportunities with Brexit. You know, procurement law will change. So we've got an opportunity now to do what America does, to do what France does, which ignores the rules, and actually start writing in some of the procurement of asking for a percentage to stay in UK manufacturing. And I think, you know, getting that message across to government, getting that message across to procurement, that's maybe one of my asks from everybody here today, is that, you know, I feel I've been talking non-stop about this. I'm like a one-track person. I've been speaking to my MP, my MSP, I've been speaking to ministers, CBI. I had a roundtable meeting with the Secretary of State on Monday, brought this up again. He said he would actually speak to Boris about this. Whether he does or not, I don't know. But I'm constantly pushing this message. And I think I'm just one little voice. But if everybody else was doing the same thing and contacting, you know, picking up that phone, if you haven't already done so, and talk to them about this and saying, you know, we have an opportunity here with Brexit. Why don't we start adding this into the procurement stage? It wouldn't, if a contract, you know, was worth, I don't know how many millions, and if we just said a percentage must go to UK, it would probably only add a very small percentage to the overall contract cost. But what a difference it would make to the economy, what a difference it would make to the industry. So that's my big thing. And also, I think also from a company point of view and an individual point of view, I can't preach to the government unless I'm also following that same rule. So we are also, as a company, looking at more UK local suppliers. And I'm also looking at buying more British, you know, buy British. So that's me. That's me over with. Over back to you, Yvette.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Declan, I've noticed there's some questions here for Be Gentle with the BSFI. They seem to be targeted today, so go ahead with those questions.
Sure, let's go. So a question we've got here is when a counterfeit PPE and the company is identified from the BSIF, is it shared with other EU associations and other notified bodies?
Short and sweet, yes it is. If the documentation is fraud, the notified body is also duty bound to report it to the notifying authority and share it with the EU Commission. Mm-hmm. So yes, it is.
Okay, and a follow-up question, is that going to change?
Behind on our 300 so far, but
sorry, what was that? Please repeat that.
We might be slightly behind, Yvette, with the 300 being totally circulated. Mm-hmm. But by and large, it is.
One of the question that was emailed in to me, they wanted to ask you why, when you know there are companies operating in our industry, I'm sad to say, do you actually, what do you actually do to reprimand those companies for selling counterfeit goods?
Okay, is that to me?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. Well, firstly, we are not a government authority. The authority who can sanction is the Health and Safety Executive or Trading Standards, who can take enforcement procedures. So that's where we become intelligence in the marketplace and report those companies on. But I want to make the point that we were, I thought, exceptionally fair. We would engage with people that we did not know, had never met before, never heard of, whose core business could be anything from mobile phone accessories to paper cups, and they were importing respiratory masks, which are safety critical products. So we would engage with them, help them to understand, and after the third or fourth stonewalling session, then we would report them. We have sadly asked one of our members at the beginning of the summer to leave, who was not following our rules. So that sanction we can have. But in terms of wider society, if they're not members, then we have no control over it.
Oh, so you do ask them to leave. I think that was the what will happen if they were one of your members and you actually knew they were your members. What would you do about it? That was the next question, but you just answered it.
Yeah, normal process that everyone should understand. You engage, you help. If somebody's done something inadvertent, to put it right. And if that's not the case and they're doing something wittingly, then they're no longer part of the firm.
And
sorry, Declan, if I could just come in off the back
Sure.
of that. One of the things that we're very strong on when we're carrying out our audits, whether it's with our members or whether it's as part of the mystery shopping, is looking at how we're actually improving the UK marketplace. And we see a big part of that as being the educational process. If somebody's doing something wrong and they are open to understanding how they should do it right, then we will engage with them, we will support them, we will help them. Doesn't matter to us whether they are a new entrant to this or they are long-standing. If they are looking to do things the right way to help improve things for the UK and for the health of the UK workforce, we will support them and guide them. However, if, as Alan has said, we don't get a response or we get a negative response, then we are duty bound to report that on, as is anybody who identifies anything that is not compliant. Thank you.
Richard, this is for you.
Without wishing to hog it, if I may, we understand PPE, but it was very clear, and it's been clear in terms of the discussions that's been going on, that the level of ignorance on PPE and the requirements for PPE outside in the marketplace is pretty high. So part of our challenge is really to transform that status so that people understand that this is the last line of defense. It's not about using the cheapest product. You know, if you get price and value in balance, you've got a good product. And going to what Sam was saying, there's an awful lot of discussion to be had about total acquisition cost of a product, through life cost of a product. You know, proper decision making that has to go on. We talked about the NHS in lots of ways. We hope the memories aren't as short as they might be, and they go back to real unit pricing. We had a classic example of letters from the BMA and the RCN talking about masks that didn't fit a diverse workforce. And a workforce in terms of doctors, which is now 49% female, and that the masks that were being provided, and I stress being provided, did not fit them. And of course, this is to protect their breathing, protect their lungs and their lives. Those masks in a variety of sizes have been available forever. They're just not specified and they're just not paid for. So somewhere in all of this, proper, meaningful, joined up conversations need to happen about the value of manufacturing in the UK, about the carbon footprint and the Green Deal, about all the things that go in a far more wider sense to providing products.
If I may, Yvette, I mean, I'd just like to agree with what Alan is saying. I think he makes a whole screed of some very, very good points. I mean, it's a bit like when you're trying to talk to people and to government, as we are trying to do. You see, you can take a horse to water, but you can't really make it drink. So we have to use all the points that Alan is saying and that we're all considering in terms of our reporting about. I mean, we can slavishly think about what's happened in the past. And of course, as we all know, being business, if you're trying to forecast and predict demand, what happens or what has happened in the past is a very clear indicator of what might happen in the future in normal circumstances. In this case, there's no point in us trying. We have to understand what happened in the past in order to be able to figure out what we want to say to people about how the future looks and where we need to be. And putting as the most common word that we've tended to use is putting resilience in the supply chain. And if we don't put resilience in the supply chain, then we can't begin to flex and understand exactly who needs what and when and how, and the myriad of all the other things that is required, particularly when you're coming to talk about PPE, is that it's got to be absolutely certificated and fit for purpose. So it's quite a dynamic part of the industry, and it seems to be like talking to Sam and what Adam was saying, it seems to be quite vibrant, and therefore I think we need to be quite clear about what it is we're going to be able to say to government.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Alan. Richard, we've seen a huge upturn in the industry for going more with technology. Have you seen that growth yourself, with people moving more towards technology because of the pandemic? And how do you think it's going to be sustainable going forward?
Okay, so just to kind of set the scene, I've been in manufacturing industry for all my working life, right? Starting in the automotive industry back in the very early days, and not just now, but for all time, those companies that survive and are able to compete on price are the ones that invest in technology to do it. If you look across the Western world, there are various places where the cost of labor is very, very high. For example, Norway, but they have a manufacturing industry because they deploy technology to do the jobs of some people. Now, that's not to say that we're going to lose jobs here. In actual fact, what it does is it creates jobs, because it keeps manufacturing as a vibrant place where people are happy to work, willing to work, and it creates new companies, new industry, and expands the businesses that we have. So I think it's the only way forward. We've seen a number of companies invest in the most difficult of times. Sometimes I have to say it's been a real help with government funding, but not particularly in the UK, I've got to say, and that's a real shame. I manage a team across Europe, and certain countries like Italy have massively responded by making funding available to help companies invest. And when they do, they're able to set up a fantastic operation to create PPE. So I think, if our government could help by putting some funding in place to do that, then companies would be more willing and more able to invest, and would be able to create the future for our families in a manufacturing organization.
Adam, I'm afraid you're not getting away. The PPE, as Sam pointed out earlier, if we only have a small amount, I believe we discussed this before, and they were talking about 20%, even if just 20% of manufacturing will be done in the UK. Is there any way that will continue? Companies here are saying we've made provision, and we're nervous when the contract we're working on is going to stop, like what happened with Warewell. Is there any chance at all, do you think, that is there any way we can secure the contract with the government for them to, and what would we have to do that?
There isn't, unfortunately, a straightforward answer to that. I mean, I think, as a lot of us have alluded to, the government, one of the potential upsides of Brexit, Sam mentioned this, is that the government can have its own procurement rules. They could have decided, irrespective of whether we left the EU or not, to source some of its public procurement from UK manufacturing. They chose not to. My honest assessment at the moment is that it is very difficult to get the government to focus on anything that isn't immediately to do with the pandemic. And I know we can make that argument that building resilience is about the pandemic, but getting them to focus on anything that's anyway further away from their end of their nose is incredibly difficult at the moment. And that's not to say that we won't. And I completely echo what Richard said. You know, not only could the government change the entire face of manufacturing in the UK, not just textiles, but across the whole of the manufacturing sector by changing its public procurement policy, but also by making funds available to invest, to upskill, to invest in R&D and all the rest of it. You know, there are huge opportunities for us all here. And we'll carry on making that. And just one final point, which is slightly off what you asked me about, is that, but just to, again, pick up on something that Sam said, which I think is incredibly important. We're all talking about the need to build resilience in our manufacturing industry here in the UK. And whilst PPE is one of the ways that we can do that, one of the ways that we all can do it as individuals is to buy stuff that's made here. Now, I'm not going to embarrass all the panelists by asking them to put their hands up if they're wearing stuff that's made in the UK. But my guess would be that not all of us are. All of us could be.
Sorry, Turkey. Tunisia.
I'm not for 1 second suggesting all of our wardrobes need to be entirely bought from the UK, and UK manufacturing. But unless we change our attitudes as consumers, it's going to be very difficult for this to trickle across the whole of the UK. We need to do everything in all of our spheres of life to change the perception of UK manufacturing, to talk about it as an interesting career, as a meaningful career, and to buy stuff that's made here, because if we don't buy it, who's going to?
That is great. Guys, do you have a question for each of the panelists here? Each of you, do you have a question you want to put forward to anyone on the panel? No? Okay,
I'm going to pick on Alan again, because there is actually one open question still on the screen. Alan, so here you go. This one's for you. So from Mark Dowling, a BSIF slogan is anyone can sell safety, but you wouldn't buy safety from anyone. What does the association need us to do for everyone in the PPE supply chain to remember this? And how can we get the registered safety supplier scheme to be like the ABTA atoll of the travel industry, i.e. a stamp consumers look for? There you go, mate. There's a challenge.
Oh, you cross it and I'll head it, Paul. I think it's the golden key in all areas of business that you encourage people to deal with, you know, quality products, capable people. We always saw the registered safety supplier scheme as something like Corgay or Gas Safe, quite honestly. But you're buying product that is there to save life in a known hazard. It's almost a no-brainer that you would go to people that knew what they're talking about. But the question that Paul read out was how do we make that normal? How do we make people insist on a registered safety supplier? There is no substitute to a registered safety supplier. We have the support of trading standards, we have the support of the health and safety executive, but like most things in this country, the government won't legislate for it. You know, Corgay and Gas Safe is an exception and it's legislated for. That would be amazing if that happened, but it will not happen. So we have to keep encouraging. We have a registered safety supplier scheme supporters website, which people can register their support. And we are seeing many more examples of people who ask those questions in pre-qualifying questionnaires. So it's definitely happening, but as you know, Paul, we're not a small team, and it's about communication and persuasion. So we are a small team, sorry. But
yeah,
I would
just add to that exactly what Adam said on buying product made in the UK. If it is in the consumer's hand to insist and ensure that their own private supply chain processes, I would say, insist that you know the registered safety suppliers are required for personal protective equipment, right?
Yeah, very much so. And by the way, we've been talking about major acquirers of product, which in this case is the NHS, but also the local authorities are major acquirers of product. And on the webinar that we mentioned earlier, which we held back in May, we had dozens of participants from those institutions. And one of our team is challenged with communicating directly with the local authorities. And when local authorities start insisting on something as a prerequisite for purchasing, that tends to help cascade it quickly. Big contracts focus people's minds, that's for sure.
Guys, I want to thank you so much for your time today. We are out of time. And I just want to say to everyone, if you have any questions for the panelists, please don't hesitate to email Declan or myself, and we will get the answers for you. Panelists, thanks again a million for your contribution today. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see all of you in June next year. God bless.
Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Take care. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.